People thought that I was dead. I'll be honest, you didn't really want to be around.
Why do you think there's this spike in neurological disorders that we've witnessed over the past few years?
I think that's a great question. You're hitting with some great questions today. I got to admit, they're pretty in depth.
What's your thought on the current state of the medical system as it stands today? What would you say, doctor, are some of your vices?
Well, my vices.
I don't think there's ever going to be a time in our lives where we're going to be confronted with taking any one-size-fits-all drug.
Well, you never know.
We never know.
You never know.
What does freedom mean to you?
That's a great question.
Hello and welcome to the Finding Freedom podcast, the show that truly has your best interest at heart, 9 times out of 10. We want to empower you to take back control of your health, wealth, happiness, and ultimately your life. We want you to find the freedom that you've constantly been looking for. Today, we have a very special guest whose career and personal journey are nothing short of incredible. My guest is one of the most prominent practitioners of clinical neuroscience in all of Ontario, based in Ottawa. He holds a diplomate from the American Chiropractic Neurology Board and fellowships in functional neurology and brain injury rehabilitation. In other words, he has a black belt in neurology. Is that right, doctor?
You're too kind. Thank you.
That's right. So welcome, doctor, to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your presence. First and foremost, before we go any further, I don't know if the audience can tell at home, but the doctor is built like a tank. And I want to know your secret, doctor. How are you able to maintain, such a physique, this kind of fitness levels at your age? And I'd love to know your age if you don't mind sharing it with us.
Absolutely. I'm 65. I actually be 65 this month. So
amazing. Well,
a few days away there.
Happy early birthday. Which date is that?
The 26th of June.
26th of June?
Yeah.
Locked and loaded.
Yep.
Marked in the calendar.
All right. Now, with respect to my fitness issue, it's really just been a lifestyle, habit for me, since I was a kid, played a lot of different sports. And, usually a lot of my friends, as they got families and careers started, they kind of tailed off. But for me, it was just a narcotic. Exercise was a narcotic. So, even to this day, I'm just, avid skier, cyclist. If it's snow or water, I love to ski. And like we were chatting before, I was out, doing a pretty tough ride this past weekend, mountain biking. But for me, it's just the endorphin rush and how it makes me feel afterwards. And, just my level of energy I have to maintain during my busy work week. It's a real necessity for me.
Like you said, yeah, it is one of the last legal drugs we have access to. I mean, you get that natural high.
Yeah.
And I hope to be half as healthy if I live as long as you.
I'm sure you will. Trust me, you will. You will.
I appreciate that. So I want to know, doctor, how long have you been practicing clinical neuroscience?
I graduated as a chiropractor in 1988. And then throughout my career, the course of clinical neuroscience was made available to me in 2010. And I went down to a seminar in Dallas, Texas. I never forget that. It was like 110 degrees down there that day. They said it was so hot that the fence posts in farmers' fields were tilting over because the ground was drying up. And of course, I go out there and I'm thinking, well, I always get off the plane. I always want to exercise and I always run. So I went out for a run, and I remember I did this run in 110 degrees and people were beeping their horn at me, shaking their head. And I thought, well, I don't know what's going on. Well, 15 minutes into the run, of course, I had to turn around. But it was just one thing that was really memorable about my first visit to Dallas. But the real key factor was I met Dr. Ted Carrick, and the seminar was on a part of the brain called the cerebellum. And I remember getting in there, and then he just started to unload this information that was just absolutely life-changing for me. It was so intriguing. These videos he showed of patients responding to this different type of care called clinical neuroscience, or in the US, they call it functional neurology. And it just, from there on in, it was just all systems go. I went into it both feet. And then I graduated with my diplomate and fellowships in 2016. So it was a long road to get there. It was quite intensive. It's a program that, you're required to sit for board exams and, submit a thesis. So it was very, very intensive program, but it was well worth it. And to this day, it's just phenomenal.
It sounds like it. It sounds like an interesting journey. And you didn't stumble upon it by accident.
No,
sure.
no, absolutely not. A little bit of background for myself. I had suffered a near life-ending car accident when I was 18. It was just one of those, unfortunate situations. I wasn't too far from home, and I was with my brother driving, and, we were turning on this intersection that was notorious for a sort of a hidden curve to it. Anyways, long story short, I just was broadsided, and I had my seatbelt on, but I was ejected from the car through the side window that was up at the time. I ended up on this, the pavement, and my mother, who was a nurse at the time, like I said, we weren't very far from home. People thought that I was dead, and one of our acquaintances, ran up to our house and summoned my parents that you may want to come now. But nevertheless, I was transported in the hospital, and I was unconscious, of course. And they thought that I wasn't going to make it. So my mother, said like, we're going to take him to the hospital that I work at. She worked at Scarborough General Hospital in Toronto at the time where I grew up. I was in the hospital for a few days and don't remember any of it, of course. But it was tough because, that back at the time of grade 13, I, had, pretty good marks. I got into, every university I applied to, and I decided to go to U of T. And that summer, I was all ready to go. And that was the summer I had the accident. And by the time September came along, I was first year university. I go to university, and I tell you, I just had the worst time. Like everything was foreign to me. I had trouble reading, concentration was out the window. I had foggy brain,
I can imagine
balance problems, just everything I hear about in my own patients. And, at the time it was a miserable time. It was horrible. In fact, it was one of those situations where it was a struggle just to try to maintain my marks. And, I remember the first year in December, I was called to the dean's office, and he said that, Mr. Lawrence, after your first semester of marks, you're on academic probation. We're going to have to let you go from the university unless you bring your marks up. Well, my only recourse after that was just basically go to rote learning, memory. And that's how I did it. I just basically became a hermit, and I had to memorize things in my only way to get through university. And, as time went on, I still maintained my exercising, which was difficult. I took up an instrument that really helped me, and drums were really important. I found out after the fact that that's one of the top instruments to help with brain injury recovery, because it has a lot of coordination and
Which instrument was that? Sorry.
Drums.
Okay.
Play the drums. So I've been playing the drums since I was 18, and still do to this day, which is great, for relaxation and so forth. But nevertheless,
maybe we'll get a solo performance for the next episode.
Maybe. But the main issue was I found that, as time went along with the exercise and music, it kind of helped me along a little bit. But when I went to chiropractic school, which had a really grueling program, again, I just had to resort to this memory process that I developed by myself. And it was really the only way I could get through. And I graduated, did pretty well. But it was that real time in when I met Dr. Carrick that all things changed, and the treatment that I received from practitioners that did that, because I received treatment, that just changed everything for me. And it was my ability to, my cognition improved, foggy brain went away, my athletic performance improved. It was just really something amazing. And I vowed to myself, even in the darkest times when I'll be honest, I didn't really want to be around because it was really dark times at those times. I remember walking home after being in the dean's office, and I thought, am I going to end up, losing my dream of graduating and do something in healthcare? But nevertheless, I vowed to myself, if I ever got out of this and there was a way for me to help other people that are in this situation, then that was my calling. And that's, pretty much why we're having this conversation today.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And to be honest, I feel it's very valuable that you yourself have gone through that.
Yeah.
And now, not to sound cliche or anything like that, but you know how they say, turn your mess into your message,
right?
Turn your obstacle into an opportunity. And
absolutely,
it's great that you're sharing this, because you're letting people know that no matter where they are right now in life, no matter how dark it seems for them, there is a way out. And we hear about these, whether it's through different podcasts or movies or whatever the case may be, or we read about these people and stories, but we have a living example right in front of us. And it's very powerful that you're sharing this message. So, I mean, I commend you for that. And I'm sure it's not easy, but
it isn't easy. And I hate to interrupt you, but for the longest time, I never wanted to share that with anybody because I felt it was too personal. If people think I was weak or, they had something wrong with my brain, I couldn't really perform what I do in my practice. But, it was the longest time. And it's only just recently that I decided that, I would say maybe I'd share that with people because, many times when I would be in practice, I would hear people kind of allude to the fact that, well, you really don't understand what's going on. Even though I would be a great listener and I really did know what was going on, I thought, one day I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go out and maybe confide in a couple of patients that I had seen that, hey, I've walked in your shoes. Well, that was just life-changing for them because they really knew that I got it for them. And, the number one thing I hear when I examine and interview patients that come to see me is that nobody really can understand what they're going through. It's bittersweet, but I can say with all confidence that I do know what they're going through.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's that relatability factor with you where you've been there, you've done that, you've seen it all, you've seen the darkest of times, and now thankfully you're on the other side of it.
Right.
You're on the other side to share that there is hope, there is a way out of it. So
absolutely,
that's incredibly powerful. And again, thanks for sharing that. Now, you did touch upon a few things, a few key themes that we're going to also touch upon.
Okay.
So one of them is brain fog. And you did mention you've been through that and you know what it feels like. And so many people these days, it's quite a prevalent thing that's going on right now. So what can you say exactly, doctor, to the people that are going through brain fog, at different varieties, different levels?
Sure.
And what can you say about that and what's the way out of it?
Okay. Well, just to keep it simple, brain fog is code for brain inflammation. People think that in order to sustain a brain injury, it has to be some type of mechanical injury. And of course, that's one of the cases, but it can also be something emotional, like PTSD can injure the brain. It could be something physiological, like chemicals or illicit drugs, for example. So brain fog, when it develops, is this type of inflammation. Now, inflammation in the brain can come from, let's say, from a mechanical example, where the brain may have this type of torque or rotational or translational forces distributed to it that cause actual injury to the brain. And then, of course, you can have where this inflammation could be also fueled by a problem in the gut, because the brain blood and gut blood barrier have very, very, very similar architecture. And a lot of people don't realize that in many cases, I think the statistics around 33% of cases, individuals that have head injury can also develop what's known as an inflammatory gut or leaky gut syndrome, which are very closely related. And what that does is that inflammatory issue in the gut can actually fuel inflammation in the brain as well. I don't know if you remember a while back, Time Magazine had the gut, the cover of Time Magazine called the gut the second brain. But this is where we have things like the seat of our immune system is in the gut. Plus, very importantly, is where the large majority of what's called neurotransmitters are produced. And neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, that, the happy neurotransmitter, feel good one that we get the,
chemicals and all that stuff.
Exactly. Acetylcholine, GABA aminobutyric acid, that's all manufactured in the gut. And so therefore, when you look at the issue of brain fog, you want to make sure you look at the brain itself, but also the gut function as well to deal with that. So the way out for that would be, of course, finding a practitioner that would address, the function of your brain, as well as the gut, and making sure the testing you do for the gut is accurate. And then, of course, prescribing any type of treatment is, dedicated to that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're talking about is going and addressing the root cause of the issue rather than just, look at the symptom of it,
right,
or, going maybe very far away from the root cause. And I believe you're quite brilliant at doing that. And I have firsthand experience myself. That's something very valuable. And people lots of the time miss out on the importance of, the microbiome and how valuable that is, and what information it gives us about the rest of the body. So that's extremely valuable. So Dr. Lawrence, I wanted to ask about concussions, and I'm pretty sure that's your specialty, and you've dealt with it yourself through telling us your story. So I'd love to expand more about concussions, what causes them, what does it feel like if a person has a concussion? How do they know? You know, there used to be certain science that's kind of outdated, and they used to have a certain methodology, and now new science is in and it's a totally different approach. So if you could talk and expand upon that, that would be great.
Sure. Well, it's a broad subject. I mean, it's huge. One thing I will admit right from the outset, the more I learn about the brain, the less I know, which is, just a fact of life. But the issue is when we look at brain injury, we talk about the mechanical and the physiological aspect. But I'd just like to touch on some of the really common symptoms that individuals will present to my office with, and maybe give your listeners a little bit of an idea to kind of connect the dots, what the cause of those are. Because a lot of times when I ask people, they mention these certain symptoms. I said, has anybody told you why that is? I get, the blank look all the time. So, this is a great format for us to cover that. So some of the more common symptoms that will come upon are things like light and sound sensitivity. So one of those areas of the brain that's related to that is a top part of your brainstem called your midbrain. And this is where we have what's called nuclei that will control things like pupillary constriction and dilation. So if that particular nuclei, called the Edinger-Westphal nuclei, isn't working very well because of damage, then individuals will have a harder time constricting their pupils. The light washes over their retina. And of course, they want to put sunglasses on, or they'll shy away from the light. Other issues people will have is they find that they'll have poor concentration. And that's one of the main areas. And we can't, before I go any further, I don't want to, put the brain down as these nice, neat sections that we can, treat, and it's all nice and
more complicated.
Yeah, it's far more and interactive. Exactly. Yeah. So the area for poor concentration is the frontal lobe. The executive function is our seat of executive function, very complex part of the brain. Other areas for poor memory can be found in an area of the brain called the hippocampus, which is the medial aspect of the temporal lobe. So people say, I walk in a room and I forgot why I was there, or, I can't, find a word, and that's more in temporal lobe area for the speech expression and reception area. But we have these understanding of how the brain works. And what I see as well is that the brain's a functional unit where in order to analyze it, you want to do a functional analysis of the brain. So one of the premier technologies we have out there for analyzing the brain is MRIs and CAT scans. And then we'll use MRI, for example. Right. Fantastic technology, like unbelievable. But when it comes to brain injury, the very, very, very small percentage of brain injuries is where the MRI is going to be very effective for, and what I mean by that is for individuals that might have a brain trauma that might have a space-occupying lesion like a subdural hematoma or a brain bleed. MRI is absolutely important, But when it comes to functional problems with the brain, the vast majority of the injuries are functional in nature. When you have an MRI done, they look normal. So unless there's some pre-existing pathology, but for the most part, they're normal. So, a patient will go in, they get analyzing the ER, or they'll have the MRI done later on if they haven't recovered, and they're at a loss. Their physician's at a loss. So this is where we have to utilize in the medical literature, some of the analysis of how the brain works. And one of the biggest sensory systems that we use is the visual system. So we can measure things like, smooth pursuit in the horizontal plane. That's a frontal temporal lobe issue. Vertical smooth pursuit eye movement. That's the midbrain we talked about. The speed of fast eye movements called saccades. That's a part in the brain called the pons. Or the accuracy of fast eye movements is relegated to the cerebellum. So we can use all these type of technologies, compare it to normative data, and then we can give the patient an idea where their problem is, and then more importantly, use some evidence-based therapy to help treat the brain. And as far as I know, the singular research that shows evidence-based for treating concussions is what's known as head-eye vestibular motion therapy, is what we use in our clinic. Right. And it's proven itself to be excellent. We don't help everybody. We do not do that. My batting average is about 78% of patients I see do very, very well.
That's quite impressive.
It is. I always wish it could be better, but the other 21% for various reasons that are out of my control, they don't do so well. But those high 70% patients, they're able to get back to their activities of daily living.
That's pretty profound, to be honest. And I wanted to go even further beyond that and talk about, because you yourself were an athlete and probably still are, but especially for people involved in high contact sports, whether we're talking about hockey, MMA, boxing, and these sports that are growing popularity.
Yeah.
What should athletes keep in mind going into these, sports? How should they protect themselves and anticipate these types of events that are almost always going to happen or inevitably going to happen at a certain rate?
Right. And so here's what we run into is, I'll just go off on a tiny little tangent here because it's near and dear to my heart. I regularly hear, stories about, well, we're going to develop the next new helmet to help stop brain injury. Now, I admit some of the advanced technology like the MIPS is great, but when it comes to, pure physics, when your brain and head are going at, a certain velocity and reach zero terminal velocity, you're going to have some physical consequence of that. Now, to get back to your question about what can athletes do to help themselves? Well, one of the biggest things for contact sports is, believe it or not, is increasing neck strength. Huge. There was a University of Cincinnati, I believe it was, under a Dr. Joe Clark, had done a prototype of a treatment protocol where they had their athletes go on a very significant neck strengthening program. And they found, and the numbers escape me at the moment, but they found that there was a statistically significant decrease in post-concussion issues with their athletes. So that's been adopted by the NHLPA. So a lot of professional teams now do that extra strengthening. And if you look at F1 drivers, like their necks are massive, and that's because of the G-force. But you'll find that to help them as well prevent head injury, that's an extra added benefit for them. But that's one of the things they can do. The other one is that they can go and have a functional evaluation of their brain by a qualified practitioner. And in a lot of cases, this is a sports performance enhancement issue. They may not have a concussion at all, but sports performance enhancement, we're using this type of clinical neuroscience is exploding right now, where you can have athletes increase their ability to gain that extra edge. And then, as you know, for example, the hockey players I treat, sometimes having better what's called saccadic eye accuracy, amounts to 2 or 3 extra zeros on their contract. So these are the sort of things that athletes can go in. So if they have better reaction time, they can see the play in their peripheral vision better. I mean, these are things that can prevent them from getting into, a traumatic situation. And, of course, nutrition and being under the care of, a good musculoskeletal practitioner for their musculoskeletal healthcare. These are just some of the things that are, really helps athletes going forward.
Absolutely. And I'm sure many of us have seen those videos, especially with boxers.
Yeah.
That's the first visual that comes to mind when you talk about neck strengthening. And we think of these, legendary boxers who are constantly training their neck and sometimes in unusual positions, but, they have the widest necks, and absolutely plays a role, just as you said. So that's something they should definitely keep in mind.
Yeah, well, it is true, but there are what's known as limitations to matter. So yes, I can tell people go get a evaluation, strengthen your neck, all these sort of issues. But if your head is subjected to continuous trauma, I mean, there's only so far the current technology and our understanding of recovery of brain injuries can be had. So there's always limits. I'd like to leave it as that.
Another sensitive issue when we talk about, for example, the cognitive decline that is associated more often than not with aging. And when we talk about dementia, for example, first of all, if you'd like to expand on the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's, for example, to my understanding, dementia is the broader umbrella term of cognitive decline. And then Alzheimer's is a subset of that. And then maybe we could talk a little bit about that. And is it ever too early to approach, the conversation of Alzheimer's with a young man, for example? Are there any steps that he could take to avoid going down that path if he knows he's susceptible due to genetics and things of that nature?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think what I would do is for the topic of Alzheimer's, that's a little bit more of a separate issue from the head trauma, but dementia is right in the wheelhouse of that. I think for more practicality for our conversation right now, I think we should be aware of the fact that when an individual sustains a head trauma. And I want to back up maybe a second here, is that I don't want to be the bearer of doom and gloom here, because, we can sustain a head trauma, and there's, statistically a 65% chance that nothing will come of it. Like, you can have maybe a few days of some symptoms that might occur, and as long as they're resolved within 10 to 14 days, generally, all is good. But the 35% of individuals, what we call the miserable minority, no disrespect to anybody, but that's what it's termed as. You have a much higher risk of developing dementia if you have a diagnosed concussion. So that's where we have to think, okay, what can we do to help that? And I kind of see out there that people go, once I've got my head trauma, there's nothing to be done, and I'm just going to have to sit there and look at the wall and wait for the dementia to hit me. Well, that couldn't be any further from the truth. If you consider your brain to be a part of your body where you can condition it and take advantage of this term that I think everybody knows about, what's known as neuroplasticity, we can actually change our brain. And, I see that in my office. So, if we go back to what I talked about these different types of, visual analysis, for example, I have a concussed patient come in, we see that their numbers are, way away from the normative data. We start working with them, giving them stuff they can do at home, exercise they can do at home, nutrition, all sorts of other things. And what we see is subjectively they go, hey, doc, I feel so much better. For me, that's nice to hear, but it's not good enough, because I'm, very, I like quantifiable data. So then we retest them with this information where we have their baseline where we saw them, and then the new data. We can actually see these numbers have statistically changed for the better. And that's neuroplasticity at play. And there's things you can do to change the path of your health of your brain. Mm-hmm. Now, am I sitting here saying, hey, you won't get dementia? I would never go out on a limb like that, but at least you're doing something to help yourself. And you can see it with the data. And, these long-term studies that are, on the table for, head-eye vestibular motion therapy that we're going to see. I've treated patients that I've been following up for years since I've started. And their values are great. And that's one of the big questions I get asked is, hey, once you do this type of therapy, does it, fade away after you've stopped seeing me? And the answer is no, it's quite the opposite. Once you get that neuroplasticity started, it helps. And then we give patients, things for cognitive exercises and apps they can use to really keep their brain active from that aspect and really to fight off that dementia. And because the worst thing you could do is just, what I say is die with a clicker in your hand. Like, don't sit in front of that TV and don't, utilize your brain or exercise. These are things you just have to do that. I mean, it's just, there's no two ways around it.
And you can always be fighting back. And is it right to think of it as a muscle that you always need to maintain and train?
Yeah. I mean, we could use that in a crude analogy. Yeah, we could use that. I mean, it's such a complex part of our body that, it needs to be used, and then that's from a physical and a cognitive and a neurological standpoint,
use it or lose it.
Yeah. Use it or lose it. I mean, that's the old adage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that there always, like I said, there's always hope. There's always something that could be done, isn't it?
Well, like I'm across from you, I think this is the living, breathing example of hope, because believe me, I was down at hope zero at one time, but thankfully I can say that with all confidence, there is hope. Most definitely.
Over the past few years, we've seen a rise in neurological disorders. Mm-hmm. Now there might be different speculation as to what is causing these neurological disorders. And it's quite hard to deny how much they've increased across the board, from something as mild as functional neurologic disorder. I don't know if you want to call that mild, but it could go all the way up to MS, or even talk about, let's say, Guillain-Barré. Mm-hmm. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Guillain-Barré, yeah, very good.
All right. So why do you think, Doctor, and you have the numbers, you can speak to the numbers better than I could ever.
Right.
That's your domain, and you see the numbers on a daily basis. So why do you think there's this spike in neurological disorders that we've witnessed over the past few years?
Oh, well, that's a multi-part question, so I'll try to tackle it as best as I can. I think let's start maybe with the low-hanging fruit would be the demographics. So, we're coming into a point now where the boomers are coming into the big echo of the demographics. So of course, in that age group, we tend to have, a greater number of health conditions. So potentially it could be just a statistical issue that's going on there. The other issue is we may have better diagnostic capabilities to identify these disorders is another one. And then, of course, going on to the fact that, is it something in our food supply that could be doing this? Is there, some issues with, some of the chemicals we use for our food supply? Is it, the fact that we're in a digital age where people are less active, like scrolling on their phones all day, being on social media all day? I think it's a multifactorial factor issue, I should say, that's at play here. That would be my best guess at the moment. And but the good news is that we have with that better tools to deal with these things going forward. And there's some great research in the medical profession that's being done, just a phenomenal stuff. And so again, it's not all doom and gloom, but that would be my take on the demographics and the statistical phase of things right now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And like you said, it's a multifaceted situation, and there are many culprits at play, right? Whether, like you said, there's the food supply, toxins in the environment, all of these things that have been introduced across the span of time in the past few years. So there's always something going on, right? So it's a matter of getting our defenses as strong as possible, getting our immunity as strong as possible, basically getting all of our tools ready and going to war against all of these diseases, all of these cognitive declines that we're seeing. And the better equipped we are, the more capable we are of handling these situations, and we won't just submit to our demise.
Absolutely. I think another interesting point is, and I can tell you firsthand in my own practice, is that, of course, prior to COVID, we were just humming along beautifully, treating our patients, and, a lot of patients were, getting great results, and, they're sending them on their way to live their life. And one thing that we noticed is that when COVID hit, during COVID and after COVID, certainly, we had quite a number of my patients came back quizzing me and quite distressed that a lot of their symptoms returned again. To me, that was a bit of an issue, because I couldn't really, in the early stages of COVID, I couldn't really understand how that was, because my understanding was it was a primarily a respiratory injury, disease, and with everybody on respirators and so on and so forth. But the literature, as it's gone along, has defined the fact that in fact it does affect the brain as well. And then that sort of connected the dots for me. And we'd had a number of patients that had COVID that were coming in with symptoms they check off on our intake forms that were just very, very suspiciously close to what a brain injury was. And of course, you treat what you find, is the old adage, and that's what we did. And that was a real eye opener, how that was something that was something that presented one way, but actually also presented in another way that was related to neurology.
Speaking about the medical system, whether we're talking about here locally in Canada or North America more broadly, or even the entire world for that matter, I think people, and especially in the past few years, there has been faith that has been lost in the medical system for various reasons. Now, it's a there are many components to this question, but it's like, first of all, why has the faith been lost? What has been going on? I mean, many people, unfortunately, have had quite a terrible experience whether it's at the ER, in the walk-in clinic, very long wait times, doctors that are overworked. And then if you go further beyond that, you start to question, okay, is the medical system designed to cure us, or is it designed to prolong treatment and to unfortunately benefit? Of course, there is a financial component to every industry on earth. And if you want to say there's a good and bad, right, with every single industry. But it's quite a broad question. We can go down many different paths. But what's your thought on the current state of the medical system as it stands today?
Well, I'll preface that by saying I'm on the outside looking in on that, but I have my mother and my two sisters are nurses, so they're in the medical system. First, I want to say, first off, is the medical system is under a tremendous amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about, we're losing faith in them, but in defense of the medical profession, I will say this, straight up, is that in our information age we're in now, a lot of individuals will go to the internet for medical information. And I have to admit, that's tough on practitioners. It's really, really tough on them, where they'll have the patient come in, they've had, extensive schooling. All of a sudden they have a patient come in and said, hey, I saw in a YouTube video that this is this, and that's what I think I have. And, they'll question the doctor, and that's, they're right. But that's really tough in a day. I mean, I have it as well. Like, patients will come in and explain, they see these certain things, and I do my best to answer them. And secondly is that, you have to understand that practitioners, they can't be all things to all people. I'm in a very privileged position where I have a very relatively narrow range of conditions I treat. If somebody came to me for a kidney problem or, had an issue with, a fracture in the bone, I'm not the guy to see you for that. Mm-hmm. My general practitioner, the poor guy, I feel for him, because he's got to know a lot of everything about everything. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's really, really difficult for them. And of course you get patients that will come in and they demand an answer right away and a cure right away. That's tough for them. But on the other flip side of the coin, there's always improvement can be made in any system. And let's use the healthcare system. Let's not use the word medicine, because I think we're just pointing fingers too much here. But I think the key here is, if we could take a step back at a 30,000 foot view of, what are the available resources we have for dealing with certain conditions, and is there a better way to triage them? And is there a better way that we can, funnel these conditions to other individuals? That would be the utopic way to look at it. However, there's something called bias that's out there. And bias is a darn hard thing to get rid of. And I'll be honest with you, in my small world of, treating head trauma, in cases I've just lost count of, when people go, hey, I heard about Dr. Lawrence and I want to go see him. And, somebody will look up my name and they'll see, diplomate, fellowship, blah, blah, blah. And I'll see the word chiropractor, which I don't really practice much anymore. They go, no, I can't understand how you want to go see a chiropractor who's going to, adjust your neck or your lower back and fix your head trauma. I mean, it's a real issue. So there's many layers to this thing. And, finances play into the case as well. I mean, there's only a limited amount of resources we have for these sort of things. Again, in the utopic world, if we were able to have everybody's qualifications on the table, see what they do, and, work more cohesively, again, that's an obvious thing. It would be better, but there's a lot of, financial issues that are at play. There's bias at play. It's just too complex of an issue. And, many different governments have tried to solve it and they haven't. And, people think we have a doctor shortage. That may or may not be the case, but we've seen since COVID, that the access to healthcare is really taken a downturn. So I wish I had the answer. If I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But, even those small steps to maybe having more of a central reevaluation of triaging patients so that we don't get bottlenecks in certain places, I guess that'd be my best answer I can give you, at this moment in time.
No, it's a great answer. And I do appreciate how much of a complex and sensitive issue it is. It's not, if it was simple, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it definitely goes quite deep. And like you said, we could go many layers down the rabbit hole.
Right.
I do respect very much practitioners like yourself who, once again, practice what they preach, look at the problem from a holistic standpoint and examine and try to dissect and go to the core issue and what's really going on, what lies beneath. Now, correct me if I'm mistaken, doctor, and you can speak to this better than I could ever do. So doctors conventionally these days, although there are many, many great and brilliant doctors, and without doctors, many people would lose their lives. That's a fact. But my question is, has it turned into just an industry of managing symptoms and prolonging life at the sacrifice of the quality of it? So trying to prolong life regardless of what the quality is like. So the person might live a few extra years, but in the process, his blood pressure is through the roof, or, he's frail and weak. He can barely get up. I'm sure we know people in our immediate circle that have dealt with consequences like that. And it's a very tough thing to witness. So how do we steer away from just simply going right to medication as a first resort and going to pills as the end all be all? So how do we avoid that? And I feel like there's a revamp that needs to happen. And I'm just thinking out loud here. It's like, I believe doctors do about 25 hours of nutrition throughout their entire course of education. And to be honest, I feel that's quite problematic. I think many people agree with me. Again, we're just regular citizens making speculations. But I think it's a fair thing to say that nutrition needs to be taken into consideration, lifestyle. And unfortunately, lots of the time, whether we're talking about family doctors or even cardiologists, you'd go and find an out of shape doctor that doesn't, that's smoking, that doesn't take care of their health, and is preaching what they're not practicing. It's a sad thing to see for them. They're not taking care of themselves, and they're going down a dark path, and then they're prescribing something that they're not even sustaining. So what are your thoughts about that? And I'd love to hear, your perspective, because you're in the heart of all of this, and you're a very respectable, reputable doctor. And I'm sure many people would love to hear your thoughts, and hopefully we could change, be the beginning of the change that we'd love to see.
Well, I think that's a great question. Again, it's you're hitting with some great questions today. I got to admit, they're pretty in depth. I guess the first thing to talk about the issue of medication. I'm not anti-medication. Medication is pharmacology's essential, absolutely essential. I think you could look at it in two ways. In the pharmacology world and the natural supplement world, there's overprescription in both. There absolutely is overprescription in both. You think one is safer than the other, that's up for debate, but you have to be careful with both of them is really important. So getting back to the issue of, how can we maybe steer ourselves away from pills and lead a more of a health prevention lifestyle? I think the issue is we've seen a change over time where, back in the 50s and 60s, exercise really was, not super in vogue, but diet at that time was much better. Well, previous to that was quite a bit better. So I think I remember seeing a picture of Manhattan Beach in New York City, a picture of beachgoers in 1962 or something like that. And then there's one in 2023. And of course, you see there's a huge difference
Vast
there.
difference. Mm-hmm.
So, diet plays into that as a big thing. And again, we're in a situation where we're in this digital age where, being sedentary is more of an issue. They call sitting the new smoking.
It's the new smoking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but on the flip side of that, we've seen that, the advent of physical activity has just gone through the roof, just all sorts of things, CrossFit training, Spartan races, triathlons, so the whole 9 yards. We've really seen that come up. So being on the prevention journey, if you think you're going to go to your healthcare practitioner and have them be your savior, that's really not the case. You got to be your own advocate for your own health. And that's where you could use them as advice source, which is great. And again, the internet also has its sources as well. But that's a real inside job as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you go in, and if you've got, a path where whichever type of healthcare practitioner you're seeing, and you just don't feel maybe that's the right path, seeking second opinions is always your, God-given right to do that sort of thing. But I think really the real person to look at for that preventative type of healthful lifestyle is the person you're looking at in the mirror. But that's tough. Sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself, which is difficult because there's no accountability. And what happens is most of people's attitude is, I won't do anything until something forces me to do that, which is either pain or some chronic condition. And then they react. So our general mentality is not one of prevention generally. It's, let's do something once, I'm forced to do it. And that's where our medical system comes in. And that's where they have to take that burden on, that's their unfortunate responsibility. And that's why there's I think one of the reasons for the backlog is because, it starts with our mentality of, a number of people saying, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to coast along. And then if something goes wrong, then I'll go have somebody else here, you fix me kind of thing. So we got those two, issues at play that's, caused our, one of the reasons that caused our reliance on some maybe type of supplements or medication that's gotten us to this point.
I really love what you said earlier about how you should be your own advocate, for your health, because nobody's going to be taking care of you better than yourself. Nobody wants the best for you more than you do for yourself. And that's exactly what this show is about. It's to empower people, because we've outsourced all of these things for long enough. We've outsourced our health to hospitals and, to people outside of ourselves. We've outsourced our finances. All of these things, we've given power to other people outside of us.
Right.
When in reality, we could take back that power through education, through proper guidance, knowing, we have more access to knowledge than any previous time in human history. So we might as well take advantage of it, in the right way, rather than just watch cat videos and
well, you're making a great point, but I think, if you think of, maybe one of your type of average listener who goes, well, that's a great advice, but how do I know I'm getting, if I want to, bring that all in to be my own responsibility, how do I know I'm getting the right advice? That's a difficult situation too, because there's a lot of well-meaning people out there in finances, healthcare, whatever it is, real estate, and they mean well, but maybe it's not the right advice for that person. And, that's always, going to be a challenge for people to, find the individual that they can trust, and maybe find somebody that has found great results with other people that have dealt with that person. So, there's always that issue that could be a bit of a challenge for somebody.
Absolutely. These are some hard-hitting points. And I really hope that, I know for a fact people are tuning in and listening, perking up their ears, because there's a lot of value in what you're saying. And more importantly than just listening and being a passive listener, you have to be proactive and take, and towards the end of this, I'd love to get a few tips for myself and the listeners about how we could go about this through supplementation and other methods. So what do you think are some of the worst habits that we do as human beings that impact our cognitive health negatively? I mean, I could think of a few, whether it's smoking, and I'm probably one of the biggest opponents of smoking for many different reasons. So we got smoking, fast food, inactivity, sedentary lifestyle, processed food, sugar.
Yeah.
So if you were to rank, first of all, maybe there's a lot more, but if we were to focus on these 4 or 5 things, how would you rank them from bad to worse? Smoking, alcohol, processed food, inactivity. What would you say is bad, and what would you say is the absolute worst for us?
Wow.
In terms of cognitive
in terms of cognitive. Okay. Yeah. That's a big one. It'd be difficult to rank them, because if we say sedentary lifestyle might be really, really terrible for John Smith, but it might be third on the list for Mary Jones, sort of thing. So, I think if I can get away with it, we'll put them all in a group 1. But from a cognitive standpoint, what I see a lot is incessant scrolling on your phone, is just getting trapped into that social media black hole, as I call it. And it's tough. You got these cute
Doom
videos,
scrolling.
you death, what do they call that? Death scrolling
Doom
or whatever
scrolling,
it is. And you just keep going and going. Next thing you know, you look up and it's like 45 minutes of your life is gone. And what did you take from that? Nothing. Now I admit it. I don't want to be, nothing but, all seriousness and everything. You got to have some entertainment and fun, but
for sure,
that actually really, really can be like addictive,
Detrimental.
like detrimental, addictive for sure, for sure. So, I mean, I've done it. I've put these timers on and
We all
it blinks
do.
and you just shut it down. You
And
keep
then
going.
boom, it's gone.
Yeah. And it's tough, but again, it's an accountability issue. You know, it starts from you kind of thing. But from a cognitive standpoint, I would say that individuals, as they say, for example, when they retire or they've switched careers and they're in between careers, for example, they don't do any lifelong learning. Like learning is really, really important. It challenges your mind for memory, for problem solving. This is why, you know, we see that there's been a bit of an uptick in these, you know, online courses that you can take. And I forget the name of the program that has it, that you can go and there's just a huge laundry list of online courses you take. I don't care what it would be, but take something that interests you and make sure lifelong learning or learn a new skill, new trade, or if you're doing a career change, you know, you have that at your fingertips. You can do that sort of thing and try to be the best in whatever business you're in. You know, that's a really key factor. You know, I always remember hearing that story, you know, if you're a street sweeper, be the best one you can be. And again, I mean, nobody would want to be a street sweeper the rest of their life, but you never know when you become to try to be the best at you are, what you do, it opens up a whole ton of doors and it's great for your brain. Like it really is fantastic for your brain.
I could not agree more. I mean, even if we're talking about things like chess, brain games, things that are, you know, stimulating your cognitive abilities.
Yeah. Well, there's one that's a great one I have my patients do, and it's easy to do. You can find this on the App Store, and I have no disclosures here whatsoever. And there's many of them, but these are some of the ones that are great is, you know, the Stroop effect. It was developed by an American psychologist, I believe it was, Joseph Stroop. And it's a great brain game for your frontal lobe primarily. And then there's another great one called Neuronation. Again, you get these on the App Store. And these are really great brain games you can do to keep your brain sharp. And then, you know, add that into the lifelong learning. You know, there's stuff you can do. And you, of course, you're going to, you know, sprinkle some entertainment. You can sit down and watch TV and relax. But, you know, to help with brain function, you know, just a quick aside is you have to realize your brain has two sources of fuel, oxygen and glucose. And when we eat, we convert our food into glucose, which is fuel for our physiological function for our body. So when you know, have dinner, for example, go for a walk after dinner. You know, when I go to Italy, it's amazing. You do not see overweight people there because walking is a big part of their life. After dinner, they'll meet and it's just phenomenal.
Which part of Italy is your favorite?
Well, I like the Tuscan region, you know, and Tuscany. And I really enjoy it because I cycle there and it's beautiful. And they really love cyclists there. They're very, very respectful of them. But nevertheless, so they, you know, they'll have whole food and then they'll go for a walk. And this is very good for our blood sugar regulation and also oxygenates our brain, which is very, very important. So if you're eating, you know, things like white sugar and carbohydrates that are bad for you, and not that I'm against carbohydrates, but, you know, simple things like eating your vegetables first, protein second, and your carbohydrates third. This is from a large study at Massachusetts General Hospital for blood sugar regulation. You can really manage your blood sugar regulation very, very well. And that's important for brain function. You know, it's very, very important for brain function. You know, not skipping your meals. I mean, if you skip breakfast, which a lot of people do, you're fasting for dinner time till when you eat again. Yes, I understand, you know, targeted fasting is good. You know, there's always people can argue both sides, but your brain needs fuel, your body needs fuel. And that's, you know, something I wanted to make sure that, you know, I get across for people, that you can take simple things to do to help yourself. They're not complex.
They're at our disposal.
Easily at our disposal.
And I would say 95% of them are free.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be this, oh, I got to, you know, save money and it's going to drain my bank account. It's nothing to do with that. Nothing.
Something as simple as a 5-10 minute walk. I've heard, you know, right after having your meal, it could help you with digestion, and it has all these different benefits. And to add to what you said, yes, it does enhance the cognitive abilities that you got. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely
definitely valuable. Now, this is an interesting one, and I'm sure people would love to know more about you know, the man behind the title. You did tell us a little bit about what you love to do in your free time, and you love being active, and maybe you can expand on that. But on the flip side, we're all human, right? So we all got our vices. And what would you say, doctor, are some of your vices, or maybe even some bad habits, whether it's you know, the late night munchies or something along those lines?
You're going to make me look bad here, which is okay. No,
whatever you're comfortable talking about.
Well, my vices, I have to admit, I have a sweet tooth, which I really fought hard to take under control, because at one time I was a chocoholic.
I think we're all recovering chocoholics at some point.
No, this was bad. Like leaving chocolate bars in my car in the summertime in the glove compartment. I go to reach for my license when I, got pulled over, and I reach up, my hands covered in chocolate. Just terrible stories like that. But that was at a time when, the whole idea of my better understanding of functional medicine and the body's chemistry and how blood sugar regulation works, which I've done a lot of postgraduate work in, really came to light. And another kind of vice is, I just really, really love to watch videos on, things like on water skiing and mountain biking, to always get better, or backcountry skiing. So sometimes, my wife will, call down, are you, finished down there? And it's, 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm still trying to get better at these sports that I'm, maybe not the best I could be at.
So you're a perfectionist to some degree.
Yeah, I just, it's just one of those things. I work harder in things I'm not good at.
Yeah.
And that's just, one of those things that I just, really value that. And I know at the end of the day, it's good for me, but that, and just trying to, when at Christmas time, when my patients give me all these chocolates and treats, I just have to, don't eat them, because it's too difficult for me to get them home, because I'll go through.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like when you go to a job interview and they say, what are some of your weaknesses? And you kind of somehow have to finesse your way around it. You have to turn your flaw into a strength somehow.
Right.
And turns out you were able to do that flawlessly. And it turns out Dr. Lawrence doesn't have many flaws.
Well,
that we know
none
about.
That I'll admit to anymore beyond this point in time.
No, but that's fair. And thank you for sharing it, I would say.
My pleasure.
So what would you say, doctor, are some of the supplements that would help enhance cognitive functioning? There's this whole trend that's been going on for the past while, where you go on YouTube or on social media and people are talking about these miracle supplements, whether it's lion's mane, adaptogens like ashwagandha, ginkgo biloba, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
What's the evidence behind these supplements? And are there certain ones that would stand out in your mind that you would recommend? I mean, I don't know if we should put a disclaimer and say there's not medical advice, but what would you tell your younger self, for example?
Yeah.
Or what would you do yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate the fact you said it's not medical advice. None of this is just our conversation, but what I've gleaned from the evidence that's out there. So I think what we should talk about in that regard is that where we're seeing the issue of, and I'll speak for supplements at this time, where things are headed towards is what's known as patient-centric care, which means we're going to be more and more making recommendations, the royal we, for supplements for people based on their own particular chemistry and laboratory results.
Right.
So it's not like, hey, everybody that comes in is going to get vitamin C, or everybody that comes in should get ashwagandha. And that's an issue, because in the healthcare publications, that are in the natural healthcare publications, I read them, and you'll hear somebody say, ashwagandha, for example, as you brought that up, is fantastic for X, Y, and Z. Well, if you think about that, you'll find that if you check 100 people, a certain percentage go, man, that ashwagandha was fantastic for me. And then there's another percentage that go, I don't know what they were talking about, but that just did not do it for me. So we have to take a step back and go, why would that be? So just to touch on this real briefly, some of these things like ashwagandha, they're stimulators of a particular type of balance in our immune system called T helper cell 1, T helper cell 2, that may work really well for an individual that has an imbalance in that way that ashwagandha would support it, versus another individual that might have an imbalance in that situation that would put it more out of balance, and therefore they wouldn't respond very well. those finer questions are more patient-centric, but in general terms, for cognitive health, I think we could look at the old standard of things like fish oil, like cold water fish oil. So if you look at why is that so important? Because the omegas are very important for helping what a process called myelination, that white matter we see on the outside of our brain and our peripheral nervous system. And if you take a step back and look at the world in general, you'll see that coastal populations that live on the sea coast, tend to have better neurological function of the brain, to put it very, very broadly. And that's because of their diets are higher in fish, and that they tend to have more of a, and we'll use the Mediterranean diet, for example, which is very, very good for the brain, as opposed to more inland diets where there might be fast foods and, a lot more additives and preservatives,
chemicals.
You got it, and chemicals. And that, that just stands to reason that this is where we, and being in Ottawa here, can more inland, obviously, we can look at utilizing some of those supplementations like the fish oil, and I would say something simple like vitamin D. Now, here's the thing about lion's mane and all those other things. When it comes to brain health, your brain, whatever you ingest, has to metabolize that, is involved in the metabolization of these supplements. Less is more when it comes to this. Now, yes, I know you might read in a publication, hey, lion's mane is great and it does, this sort of fantastic thing, or psilocybin is great for brain because now it stops depression and all these sort of things. You have to be careful that the more you add into that equation, the harder it is for your brain to metabolize all that sort of thing. And just like you might have multiple medications, so stick with the basics, and then you can always work your way up, but it's always better, less is more, because your brain has to work harder. If you're having trouble in any, type of brain issue you may have, it's harder for your brain to deal with more of these supplements, and it's better to keep it basic, like the fish oil and the vitamin D, for example, which is pretty safe recommendation for most people.
So keep it simple.
Pretty much.
Super simple.
Pretty much. And then, like I said, you can always work your way up when it's more guided by your particular lab values, for example, that might require a more in-depth analysis for that sort of thing.
And so what I gleaned from what you said is no such thing in medicine where it's like a one size fits all, isn't it?
I would say that's probably one of the more, steadfast truths that's out there. There's an old saying, you're unique, like just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So your thumbprint is your own thumbprint, and that's your own physiology. It's just you. Now, admittedly, we can't be so specific as you do nth detail individual analysis for everybody, but it's important to understand that there isn't one size that fits all. That's very important to understand that.
So yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a time in our lives where we're going to be confronted with taking any one size fits all drug.
Well, you never know.
We never know.
You never know. I mean, that's there's so many new things that have come out on the market now that are just incredible for healthcare. Yeah.
And speaking of that, you did tell me that there's going to be an exclusive piece of news over here, and I'm excited about this. I'd love to know what are some of the new advancements in healthcare that are currently on the horizon.
Well, you are right. That is something that it's a technology that's just came into Canada about 11 weeks ago. And this is the first, public forum I'm going to mention that. So you get the dibs on this one. No problem. So one of my obligations to my patients is to always make sure that there's any, leading edge technology or treatment or issue that we can be made aware of. I'm responsible for sharing that with them if I feel that it's something that has been shown to be very helpful for them, that's safe. And I have to admit, I get a ton of this stuff thrown on my inbox, on my desk, mailed to me, that says, hey, this is the next greatest, best thing. And admittedly, I have a pretty strict vetting process for these sort of things. Mm-hmm. And the vast, vast majority, even though it might not be bad, isn't just something that, really resonates with me that I would feel that would be helpful for my patients. Until probably about 6 months ago, I was made aware of this technology called Gladiator technology, that it's a wearable technology, which is, where the forefront of healthcare, one of the forefronts of healthcare is moving.
I love the name already.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, for sure. And what it is, it's a wearable technology that it's been shown to decrease inflammation, because a vast number of chronic healthcare conditions are due to chronic inflammation, increase circulation, and most importantly, stimulate stem cell activity.
Okay.
Now, so when I first heard about that, immediately my guard goes up. I go, too good to be true.
Yeah.
So, quite a bit of vetting of this process. I was able to have a conversation with the lead researcher from the University of Central Florida School of Medicine, who did the research on this. And what is shown is there's papers out there about wound repair, that it's just phenomenal, as well as helping with dopaminergic cells for Parkinson's patients.
Really?
And I will tell you, there's another paper in the works now that unfortunately I can't divulge because it's not been released yet. That's going to be really huge in the cardiac world. That's going to be quite significant. But with the boots on the ground thing, I've been using this with my patients, and it's just been phenomenal for things like joint pain, issues with movement disorders, headaches, and wound repair. Like many patients have these, unfortunate skin conditions that they're only able to deal with topicals. And, they go, is this possible? This occurred? And they send me pictures of these sort of things and show me, in real time. And what it is it's this technology that's activated by body heat. So you don't plug it in. It doesn't have an end of life. It doesn't interact with any medication, and it won't stimulate unregulated proliferation of cells, meaning, you can use it with patients that may have cancer.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying it cures cancer, and I'm not saying that, but for these other conditions that are related to inflammation, poor circulation, and some stem cell like joint injury and that sort of thing, that's its sweet spot. The issue is it's a type of technology that you wear it, and you can wear it at nighttime. You can wear it during the day, for example. So it's based on, the origin of it is based on, in acupuncture, they had in some of the acupuncture needles on the top, there's this tiny bit of ceramic material that this scientist in Taiwan wanted to find out what was in this ceramic and why did it help with acupuncture patients with their chronic pain conditions. And in any event, what he did was he broke it down and found out that there's a certain combination of metal alloy embedded in a ceramic base that, when he discovered this and then manufactured it, its first application was actually for improving fuel efficiency in diesel engines.
Okay.
So now the founders of the company were at this conference and found out that maybe there's another application for it, which they did for healthcare, and the rest is history there. This is just mind-blowing what it does for patients, and no side effects. And, so far for the patients, and I've talked to doctors all over the world, and, scanning in Oslo, all throughout the US, and they all have the same stories about how it helps their patients. Does it help everybody? No. In our case, well over 85% of patients, closer to 90% of patients that have utilized this have had a positive outcome with it. And it's a phenomenal adjunct for my patients with concussions because of the inflammation they have, as we talked about, the brain fog inflammation issue. And it's just one of those finds that I'm lucky enough this time in the era of healthcare that this is out there, and it's on the thin edge of the wedge of something that I think will be one of those things to help people without utilizing, supplements or medication.
It sounds truly fascinating. I mean, you're captivating me with everything you said. I mean, and we traditionally heard about stem cells, through the forms of injections, and you'd have to go to some faraway place like Panama or, to get the best, highest quality. But you're saying this technology activates and stimulates stem cells within your own body.
Correct.
So you don't have to go to an external source or anything of that nature.
Yeah. Well, as we know, just to keep it simple, our stem cell activity decreases as we age. That's why our joints may wear out, or we get wrinkles, or we have a general breakdown. But what this does is a very safe way, within the bodies to get that activity to work a little bit better. And, we just see some great outcomes that are occurring there. And
And
You know,
you're
I
saying
just-
it's zero side effects.
Well, there is one side effect. Sometimes when people will wear one of the technologies is called the mini blanket, which is this technology is embedded in medical grade silicone. Of course, it doesn't breathe, so they may get a heat rash, but that's in such a small percentage of people. And then to solve that problem, you just put a thin piece of cloth over your skin between that and the product, and it goes away. But I mean, my gosh, if a heat rash is your only side effect all day long,
That's a great problem to have.
That's a great problem to have. Absolutely. Absolutely.
100%. It truly is fascinating. It sounds like it's groundbreaking. And I'd be curious to know, I don't know if you could disclose some of the costs, or maybe that could be talked about privately.
It's better
in
people if they wanted to
yeah.
contact me, I could give them all that information.
Absolutely.
If they wanted to, email me directly, and you give this at the end of the podcast, it's gladiatorfir@gmail.com. And that's where I look after the narrative of how this product is delivered in Canada. So that's, my responsibility. So that's, people can find me, and I'll give them the information on that.
I would love to follow this journey and see, long term, even how it progresses. And it seems like it's already very positive and extremely promising.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of momentum as we speak. Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to follow along that journey, and maybe, who knows, I'd be one of your returning clients. It would be.
Well, I'm glad
really
you're doing so
fascinating.
well.
I appreciate you, doctor.
Yeah.
And just one of the last things I wanted to say. So you did talk about practical steps. You did talk about walking, about, having an active lifestyle, and even mental health. I believe whatever's good for your physical brain is good for your, your psychology. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. There's lots of research that demonstrates exercise and your mental outlook, your mental affect is correlated quite highly. It's good for you. I don't think we'll ever see a paper where exercise is bad for you. I mean, unless it's contraindicated, but that's just something that I think will stand the test of time.
So, I mean, and people know these things, and unfortunately it's harder to act upon it. It's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the problem again, is it's always that accountability issue, and that's why I think we'll see, apps that are designed for that accountability issue, personal trainers, you got to show up and do your thing, whatever source you need to, rely on or, activate this accountability issue, do it, because it'll help with that, getting out there and getting your heart rate up.
What would you say, doctor, keeps you motivated to stay active? It's probably a lifelong journey. It's a story that goes way back, but what keeps you motivated day after day, regardless of where you are at this stage of your life? And what would you say keeps you going?
Keeps me going?
Yeah.
So from the physical aspect, I would say it's like a tapestry in my mind where, if, for example, downhill skiing, if I'm powder skiing, just that line going down the hill where I'm just feel like I'm floating on clouds.
It's a rewarding feeling.
It's rewarding. If it's backcountry skiing, it's just, making that ascent, like in Rogers Pass I did a year or two back. That was just, one of my key issues. Like,
and you're getting a positive feedback loop.
It's amazing.
Immediately, in real time.
Absolutely. Or mountain biking, just like last weekend, I was mountain biking and going on some of these downhill runs where you're just dropping off these jumps and you're just flying through the air. It's just, and hitting those hard berms. It's just, to me, it's just everything. And that's just what I love it so much. Or water skiing, just that beautiful sunset ski where you're just carving beautiful turns and throwing up a wall of water. It's, to me, I stop and I just want to do it again,
You make being active sound very enticing, and I think if people like truly tuned in, they'd see the magic that's the light in your eyes pretty much, and I
love it.
I think it's very valuable. I wanted to end on this note, doctor, and I want to ask you, so reflecting on your entire journey since you were a kid, going through that life-changing traumatic injury, and where you stand today, looking back at your entire life and where you are at this point, how would you describe yourself in terms of freedom? I'm sure you were seeking freedom at a certain point in your life. Would you say you've attained it? And what does freedom mean to you?
I think freedom means to me is the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. That might be, again, more of a a utopic kind of issue because, I think we always have a responsibility to serve one another. And having that, I want to do whatever I want, anytime I want, kind of runs a little counter to that. So I think in my definition of freedom would be a nice mixture of the two, where I can have that opportunity to do whatever I want, whenever I want at certain times, but then also live up to my responsibility of, serving others. So that to me would be, I guess, my idyllic definition of freedom. And how far have I come to that? I would have to say that's a work in progress, and it will always be a work in progress.
It always will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of life. I mean, if you're done with the game, you're not really playing it,
There it
right?
is.
You're not enjoying it. You're not enjoying your time. Maybe you're not feeling that sense of fulfillment.
That's the deal.
But as long as the chase is continuous, there's always that next step that you want to go towards. Fulfillment is always going to be at the forefront.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So where could people find you, doctor? I mean, you did mention the email. Would you like to mention the clinic? Would you like to mention
Sure.
your contact information?
Yeah. So basically, it's the Broadview Spine and Health Center in Ottawa. And if you just look up Dr. Joseph Lawrence, just remember the river, the St. Lawrence River is always tell people, easy to remember. And you'll be able to find me there. We're, online and easy to contact. Our number in Ottawa is 613-728-2929, but you can find all that online. I'm easy to find.
Absolutely. And once again, doctor, really appreciate your time. This was truly enlightening. I mean, there's so much value added to myself, to anyone that's watching and listening, and I truly appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. You're more than welcome. More than
And
welcome.
hopefully we could do this again at some point in the future.
Would love to. Absolutely love it. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.